The Black Sea was once regarded as Russia's safe lake, a stretch of water where Moscow's fleet and supply lines operated almost unchallenged. But the early hours of November 29th erased that illusion. Ukraine's strike on Novorossiysk not only stopped the heartbeat of Russia's most important oil export route, it also dragged Moscow's entire strategic logistics structure into a whirlpool of chaos. From the loading points of the CPC pipeline to oil tankers of Russia's shadow fleet sunk offshore, one fact was exposed. The Black Sea battlefield is no longer Russia's strategic depth, but a dangerous void where the Kremlin cannot protect itself, let alone its allies. The most serious impact lies outside Moscow, more than 2,000 kilometers away, where Kazakhstan, the country that sends 80% of its oil through this route, suddenly realized that the shield it had relied on for 3 decades was cracking. A port knocked out, gas flows to Orenburg threatened, borders clogged by wartime-style controls, all forced Astana to face a reality. Dependence on Russia is no longer a strategic choice, but a national hazard. Moscow's helplessness, together with the return of the United States and increasing pressure from China, is creating a geopolitical fault line that is reshaping all of Central Asia and pulling Kazakhstan into the center of a contest where energy, security, and sovereignty are intertwined into a new front. Will Kazakhstan have the courage and the capacity to detach itself from Russia's logistics system, pivot to the Baku-Ceyhan route, and redefine its strategic position in the midst of the silent confrontation between Russia, the United States, and China? We will comment on this issue below.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, we are looking at a single precise military event that triggered a massive geopolitical realignment across the entire Central Asian region. That event was the attack on Novorossiysk, historically the Russian Empire's largest gateway to the Black Sea. We're framing this deep dive as a crucial power analysis, how one single military strike can shatter decades of established economic control and force a wholesale rewrite of global energy maps. The source material we've gathered gives an exceptional analysis of the Novorossiysk crisis and, the scramble that followed. Our mission today is to really understand the full chain reaction that turned the Black Sea from what Moscow considered its safe lake into a symbol of, Russia's logistical helplessness. And the core problem here is just fascinating because it immediately moves this story from military tactics to global economics. The attack targeted the loading points of the Caspian pipeline consortium pipeline. Now, while this pipeline ends in Russia, you have to remember the geography of ownership. 80% of the oil flowing through that critical terminal, it belonged to Kazakhstan, not Russia.
And that fact changes everything. It was an immediate, undeniable signal.
So?
Well, when those drones hit, the geopolitical risk premium for all trade that relies on Russia's infrastructure, it just spiked dramatically. For years, the vulnerability of the Caspian Pipeline Consortium, or CPC, was a known risk, in theory.
Right, a theoretical problem.
Exactly. But the November 29th strike provided definitive, painful proof that Moscow could no longer guarantee the safety of its most vital national assets, let alone the assets of its allies.
Let's unpack that catalyst then, because you have to imagine the panic this caused in Astana. Tell us what happened on the morning of November 29th, beyond just a simple hit on port facilities.
What really stands out is the targeting precision. Ukrainian naval drones, they successfully struck the loading points of the Caspian pipeline infrastructure itself. But crucially, they also hit Russian shadow fleet tankers out in open waters, specifically the Syros and the Virat.
Okay, quick pause for context. For our listeners who might not know the jargon, what does striking a shadow fleet tanker actually signify?
Oh, it's highly significant. The shadow fleet. It refers to this massive network of older vessels. They often operate outside standard Western insurance, outside regulatory frameworks. Russia uses them to move its oil and get around international sanctions.
So by hitting the Syros and the Virat,
the message wasn't just, we can hit your port. It was, we can target the sanctioned logistics you use to fund your military. And by extension, we are putting Kazakhstan's most vital economic lifeline at risk just by association.
So the damage wasn't just military, it was a piece of economic theater. And the CPC pipeline, stretching over 1,500 kilometers from the huge Tengiz oil field, it's truly the aorta of Kazakhstan's economy.
Absolutely. Kazakhstan made a strategic choice years ago, the pragmatic, easy way of trading via Russia. They essentially entrusted their entire national income to Vladimir Putin's security umbrella.
And the Novorossiysk attack just proved that umbrella was, riddled with holes.
It was. And the diplomatic backlash from the Kazakh Energy Ministry was not just sharp, it was highly calculated. They condemned the attack, yes, but the real message was aimed straight at Moscow. They emphatically stressed this is an entirely civilian international energy project and deliberately name-dropped their Western partners, like Chevron and Exxon.
That sounds like a powerful diplomatic slap in the face.
It was. Kazakhstan was basically telling Putin, your war is hitting my economy, and maybe more importantly, it's jeopardizing the investments of my Western partners. They were questioning the whole premise of the relationship. Why should Astana keep trusting Russia with its oil if Moscow can't even protect its own most vital port?
And what's really interesting here is that this explosion of anger didn't just come out of a vacuum. If we rewind the film a little, we see the strings of this 30-year energy marriage had been fraying for months. The cracks started appearing long before Novorossiysk.
They did. You have to remember the incident at the Orenburg gas plant. That Russian facility was key to a gas swap agreement used to heat Kazakhstan's northern regions. When Orenburg was struck, the threat of energy insecurity became palpable overnight in Astana.
So there was already this deep concern that Russia, preoccupied with its war, couldn't even guarantee the basic energy security of its closest partners.
That's right. And that energy insecurity quickly spilled over into logistics right at the border, leading to what our sources call an invisible Berlin Wall going up between the two supposed allies.
An invisible Berlin Wall. What does that mean on the ground?
It's a powerful metaphor for the passive aggression that emerged. It was driven by Moscow's growing security paranoia. Russian security units just started unilaterally blocking thousands of trucks coming through Kazakhstan from China, seeing them as potential Trojan horses.
And that directly undermines Kazakhstan's whole identity as a reliable transit hub.
It hits their bottom line and their sovereignty. So Astana couldn't exactly roll out the tanks. Instead, they implemented a very sophisticated strategy of passive resistance.
How?
Kazakh customs officials started using bureaucracy as a weapon. They began deliberately prolonging procedures for Russian transit, creating enormous bottlenecks, huge delays for any Russian-bound cargo. It was a cold, shadow economic war fought with paperwork.
So they were sending a clear message.
A very clear message. If you block my trade, I will choke your logistics.
Okay.
So by the time the Novorossiysk strike happened, Kazakhstan was already furious. The attack was just the final catalyst.
The final straw. The logic then dictates a profound shift. The Northern Sea PC route is now, as the sources call it, a death line. It's been declared a war zone by insurance companies. Freight rates are astronomical. So the whole energy flow is being pushed southward.
And this is the moment the Turk World Corridor, or what's more commonly known as the Middle Corridor, transforms from a strategic concept into a national security imperative. Kazakhstan has to bypass Russia entirely, and the new energy leg of this route is the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline, or BTC.
Logistically, that sounds like a massive undertaking. How does the oil actually travel along this new corridor?
It's a multimodal shift. It starts at the Kazakh ports of Aktau, or Kurik, on the Caspian Sea.
Okay.
From there, oil is loaded onto massive tankers, or even ferries that can carry entire sets of rail cars, and they cross the Caspian to the port of Baku in Azerbaijan.
And that sea crossing is the key step that frees the oil from Russian land control.
It's the critical sovereign step. Once the oil gets to Baku, it integrates into the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline system. From there, it passes through Azerbaijan, through Georgia near Tbilisi, and finally terminates at the Ceyhan terminal on Turkey's Mediterranean coast.
A complete rerouting. So why is that Ceyhan terminal in Turkey such a game changer? It sounds difficult, but strategically vital.
It offers a unique, multi-layered advantage. First, the BTC pipeline itself is one of the safest, highest-capacity pipelines in the world. But the real key is geopolitical. Ceyhan is completely isolated from the chaos in Russia's Black Sea region.
And it's under NATO protection.
Implicitly, yes. While Novorossiysk is now a war zone with a massive security premium, the Ceyhan terminal, as a major Turkish port, is under that North Atlantic Treaty Organization umbrella. This stability completely removes the risk premium from Kazakh oil. It makes it more attractive, and it eliminates the threat of Russia turning off the tap.
And this is where the superpower dynamics really come into play. It's not just Astana and Ankara redrawing this map. The United States has forcefully returned to the table, deploying what our sources call billion-dollar checks.
Washington is keenly aware of the vacuum Russia has created. You have to look at the agreement signed during President Tokayev's visit to the U.S. in November 2025, just before the Novorossiysk crisis. They signed over 30 agreements worth a staggering $17.2 billion.
$17.2 billion. That is a massive endorsement. And the centerpiece of that was the deal with the American railway giant Wabtec, right?
Right. A $4.2 billion deal for 300 new generation freight locomotives. The message from the United States is crystal clear. We will help free you from Russia's logistical hegemony, and we will finance the modern steel legs you need to do it.
The steel legs of the Middle Corridor.
They are literally that. These locomotives are essential for moving Kazakh oil, uranium, critical minerals to the west via the Caspian Sea, completely bypassing Russia. The U.S. is directly financing Kazakhstan's logistical independence.
But there is another vast, demanding neighbor right on Kazakhstan's eastern border, China. So Astana risks escaping a wounded Russia only to fall into Chinese economic dependence.
That is the tightrope President Tokayev is walking right now. While Russia's power is sinking, a much quieter, potentially larger power is filling that vacuum. Beijing's yuan diplomacy is aggressive. Belt and road investments in Central Asia, especially Kazakhstan, exceeded $23 billion in just the first half of 2025.
That kind of capital buys enormous influence. So the destruction of the Russian route could, ironically, make them more vulnerable to China if this Western route doesn't materialize fast enough.
Exactly. If Kazakhstan can't reliably sell its oil to the West, China becomes the only buyer. And China is notorious for ruthlessly driving down prices in markets where it was the sole purchaser. It's what economists call a monopsony.
The monopsony nightmare. What does that actually look like for Astana?
It means if you're the only game in town, you dictate the price, not the seller. The Kazakh economy would just swap a dependence on a paranoid, aggressive Russia for a dependence on a demanding China that could suffocate them economically.
Yeah.
So the BTC route, via Turkey and the West, it's the necessary exit door to maintain true sovereignty.
Let's look at the final cost to Moscow. This shift isn't just a loss of prestige. We are watching a concrete economic strangulation happen in real time.
We are. For Russia, this is a loss of billions in transit fees for every single barrel of Kazakh oil that used to flow through its territory. There's a more critical, strategic loss. Moscow historically used Novorossiysk to blend large amounts of that Kazakh oil with its own Russian oil.
So they could market the blended exports as sanction-free oil.
Precisely. Kazakhstan abandoning the pipeline strips Russia of that ability to mask its exports. Full utilization of the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline deepens Russia's economic stranglehold. It opens a direct, irreparable hole in its war chest.
So those explosions on November 29th did far more than damage a few loading points. They blew an irreparable hole in Vladimir Putin's whole doctrine that the Black Sea is a Russian lake.
It collapsed the doctrine, and it fundamentally cracked his allied complex in Central Asia. Russia is demoted from an indispensable monopoly to just a risky secondary option. This whole sequence of events is the ultimate declaration that the 30-year monogamous energy marriage with Russia is officially over. Kazakhstan has watched Putin's image of regional leadership sink and decided to abandon ship for good.
So what does this all mean for the broader global picture? We're seeing the flow of energy shift profoundly from north to south, from a region of conflict to one seeking stability, and from Russian control toward Turkish sovereignty. This entire process represents the accelerated logistical collapse of a regional empire.
And this raises a really important question for the future. Can the United States and Turkey successfully use this historic, volatile opportunity to quickly establish a massive, fully functioning energy highway that bypasses Russia? If they can, it will fundamentally alter the security and economic landscape of Central Asia for a generation. The maps are changing dramatically, and the future of Central Asia's independence hinges entirely on the courage of Astana to complete this historic shift.
A battle for sovereignty waged with pipelines, customs bureaucracy, and American freight locomotives. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into how military strikes can trigger massive shifts in global power analysis.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, today we are diving deep into a really shocking paradox that's emerging from the conflict in Ukraine.
It's a stark one.
It's this contradiction, isn't it?
Right.
Between the huge price Russia pays to get its soldiers to sign up and the complete systemic disregard for their basic protection.
Exactly. We're getting these detailed reports, especially from the Lyman front.
Right, saying that Russian troops are being sent into battle essentially naked, just completely lacking basic armor.
It's a chilling picture.
It is. And our source material, reports from the Telegraph, Forbes, even Intercepted Communications, they all point to this. So for you, today, we have a mission. We need to unpack 3 key questions.
Yep.
First, why is Russia suddenly running out of basic protective gear in a critical area like Lyman? Second, How do the country's economic problems link directly to what's happening on the battlefield?
And the third, I assume, is the big
The
one.
most important one.
Yep.
What does all of this tell us about how the Russian leadership actually views its own soldiers?
A crucial question.
Because here's the paradox that just jumps out. A new Russian soldier, he signs up for a huge contract. We're talking sign-up bonuses up to $28,000.
And monthly pay starting at $3,200? That's life-changing money for many of them.
Transformative wealth. And yet, weeks later, they find out the money spent to get them there is absolutely not being spent to keep them alive. Okay, let's unpack this.
The observation from the front line is, it's stark. We're seeing Russian soldiers going into heavy combat without the absolute fundamentals.
So no helmets, no body armor.
Nothing. Not even the basic load-bearing vests to carry ammunition. This isn't about poor quality gear. This is about a complete absence of it.
And crucially, this isn't just a one-off. It's a new trend, specifically on the lineman front. We heard from Igor Kok. He's the deputy commander of Ukraine's 2nd Mechanized Battalion.
And he's saying this is new.
Exactly. He notes that this phenomenon, soldiers just rushing assaults without armor, was something they rarely saw last year. It's a recent development.
And the visual evidence, it backs this up completely. There's video footage circulating. You see Ukrainian drones targeting these soldiers, and they're just in their combat fatigues. That's it.
Which offers zero protection against shrapnel or a drone.
Zero. This isn't a maybe. It's a certainty. They are completely vulnerable.
And the numbers really tell the story here. An analysis of recent Russian assaults in that Lyman area found that out of the last 20 assault groups they documented,
20 groups.
helmets were only worn in 4 of them.
So what, only a fifth of the soldiers had even the most basic head protection?
So that's what the data suggests. Just a fraction of it.
And to understand why this is so significant, you have to look at Lyman itself. Why there? It's in the Donbass region. It was a major capture for Russia back in May of 2022.
It was their springboard, wasn't it, for assaults on places like Slavansk.
A key tactical springboard, but then they lost it.
They lost it in October 2022, and it's been a real thorn in the side ever since. They've struggled to get it back. It's a critical railway junction.
Precisely. It's a frustrating, hard-fought objective for them. So what do you do when tactics fail? You use mass. You use human waves.
You throw unarmored soldiers at the problem.
That seems to be the logic. And this level of unpreparedness, it sends a very clear message. Russia is relying on, as our sources put it, meat and cannon fodder, not professional combat tactics.
Which brings us right to the money. A source we've looked at, Dmytro Milo, he's the director of the Ukrainian Security and Cooperation Center.
Right.
He doesn't even call it a failure. He calls this lack of gear an adaptation. An adaptation to disproportionately high losses in daily meat grinder assaults.
And that word adaptation, that implies a choice. A chilling choice. The economic reality is Russia can't just absorb these kinds of losses and keep resupplying high-end gear.
Think about the costs. You just said $28,000 just for the signing bonus. A good set of armor, a helmet, what does that cost?
A full, high-quality set could run the state anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 per soldier.
So wait a minute. They'll pay the massive bonus to get the man, but they'll balk at the, relatively smaller cost to protect him.
It seems to be the calculation they're making. It suggests it's cheaper to just replace the fallen soldier than to invest in the gear that might have saved him. The root cause is massive financial strain.
Forbes reported on this. Russia spent over $25 billion on soldier pay in just the first half of 2024.
$25 billion. That's nearly 10% of their entire federal spending. Forbes called those numbers unsustainable.
And it's not just the military pay. It's part of a much deeper fiscal hole. We've seen analysis from the KE Independent.
A financial analysis firm.
They point out Russia's budget deficit has been over 2% for 7 straight years. It's forced Putin to just abandon his deficit goals entirely.
And their rainy day fund, the National Wealth Fund, it's been gutted. It's down to maybe $50 or $60 billion.
Which is less than the projected deficit for 2025 alone.
Exactly. The projected deficit is $70 billion. So the country is in a very serious financial crunch, and you're seeing the results of that on the front line.
But what's really alarming here is that these supply issues, they started way before this current crunch. This looks like a systemic long-term failure.
Absolutely. This isn't a new problem.
We've got reports from way back in May 2022. Soldiers were having to buy their own uniforms, their own jackets and trousers.
I remember that. And then in October of that year, new conscripts were confirming they received, and this is a quote, absolutely no equipment.
There was that one story about the 23-year-old conscript Vladimir.
Oh, the detail was just painful. He said he had to paint his own gun to cover up the rust.
Painting his own gun. I mean, that one little detail says more about the contempt for the average soldier than any budget deficit number ever could.
And United 24 media confirms it. This economic pressure leads directly to these mass infantry assaults. We've heard intercepted calls. Soldiers aren't even issued basic things like gas canisters. They have to buy it themselves or rely on crowdfunding.
So, okay, the money is a huge factor. The logistics are a mess. But this has been going on for years.
Which points to something darker than just a broken supply chain. It's not just that Russia can't afford the armor. It seems like the leadership often chooses not to provide it.
And that brings us to Putin's calculus. The soldier as an expendable resource.
Precisely. This isn't just about budget sheets anymore. The systemic nature of this points to a strategic prioritization, a profound callousness from the very top.
You can see this pattern going way back, can't you? Even to the beginning of his presidency.
You can. Look at the Kursk submarine disaster in August of 2000.
118 crew members died. And Putin, he famously refused international help at first.
He prioritized secrecy and, political optics over the lives of his own sailors. It established a very clear pattern right from the start.
Strategic goals over human lives.
Fast forward to today, and that analysis from Milo rings true. For the Russian command, soldiers are just expendable resources for achieving the Kremlin's political goals.
It's purely a transaction. An unequipped soldier, even one who's just walking forward, can still soak up Ukrainian ammunition.
He can reveal a firing position. He can buy time.
So if you've already paid the massive contract, why spend more money on a helmet? The soldier is a sunk cost.
And this is where the casualty figures become the horrific proof of that strategy. Minfin.Ukwa, that's the Ukrainian Ministry of Finance, they're reporting a staggering number.
So staggering.
1,172,860 Russian casualties.
Wow. Over 1.1 million. And that's just up to November 30th of this year.
You have to put that number in context. That scale of loss, it just confirms the strategy is based on pure quantity, not quality or concern for life.
So how does that compare historically?
Well, think about the Soviet-Afghan War. It lasted a decade. Russia lost around 50,000 troops in that entire war. This figure, 1.1 million, is over 23 times higher.
23 times.
When you're losing people at that rate, it shows you have a command structure that simply doesn't worry about losses. Their main resource is manpower, and they seem to treat it as if it's limitless.
And you even see this indifference in the recruitment process itself. They're not exactly looking for the fittest.
No. The Mirror United States reports a new mandate lets them recruit people with severe illnesses. We're talking cardiac diseases, endocrine problems.
Even sexually transmitted diseases like syphilis.
And they're happy to send, as the report says, old men to the front. There's no expectation these men will contribute to a long-term victory. They're just bodies to maintain the operational tempo.
And then there's the final, just crushing insult. Fortune magazine reported on this.
This was unbelievable.
The Kremlin gifted actual meat grinders to the grieving families of dead soldiers.
I mean, you can't make it up. It's not even a metaphor anymore. They're telling you exactly how they see these men, as meat for the grinder.
So it's not just that armor isn't available. That's part of it.
But it's that the leadership fundamentally does not care if they are equipped or not.
Which brings us to a horrifying third factor here. Something happening internally. Brutality. Punishment. Commanders purposefully withholding armor.
Yes. This is a mechanism of internal control, and our sources have a name for it. Zeroing.
Zeroing? What is that?
It's when commanders deliberately send their own personnel to their deaths. Often wounded soldiers or soldiers who've committed some minor infraction, they send them walking towards Ukrainian drones to be killed as a punishment.
A punishment for what? What kind of infraction gets you a death sentence from your own commander?
Incredibly small things. Carrying 1 liter of water instead of 2, wearing a non-regulation patch on your uniform.
You're kidding.
These soldiers are often arrested by military police first, and then they're sent into these assault groups, deliberately unarmored and exposed.
My God. The psychological impact of that. It turns commanders into executioners.
It's about maintaining absolute fear and obedience. If you know a tiny mistake means your own officers will sentence you to death, you will comply with anything.
And it's not just punishment. There's also deception involved.
Yes, this is another twisted part of it. Reporting from Kemok, which is sourcing intercepted calls, suggests troops often do not even suspect that they're approaching the positions of Ukrainian forces.
So they're being lied to.
The command convinces them they're moving near only allies, or maybe toward a rear logistics area. This forced complacency, it makes sure they walk into danger completely unprepared.
So they become either a tool for punishment or a disposable tool to map out Ukrainian defenses before the real attack.
Exactly. Find the machine guns, find the drone operators.
So when we put all this together, what does it all mean? The sight of these unarmored assaults on the Lyman front, it's a perfect storm.
It's the result of three compounding factors, really. First, you've got the crippling financial crisis, which makes resupply almost impossible.
Second, you have that systemic, deep-rooted failure to supply that goes back years, which points to corruption and incompetence.
And third, and this is the most crucial part, you have a leadership structure that views its soldiers as nothing more than cheap, expendable tools.
Money spent to buy time, not to win battles. And it's formalized in things like zeroing, and it's telegraphed by things like the Kursk disaster.
So this use of cannon fodder, as the reports call it, it's a tactic born from a mix of financial desperation, strategic frustration, and just profound documented callousness from the very top.
So given the unsustainable costs, the depleted national funds, and these horrific ongoing casualty figures we've talked about, the ultimate question for you to mull over is this. How long can a war strategy based entirely on treating human lives as a disposable resource possibly be maintained?